Hello everyone and welcome back to another album review. In this video I'm going to review Garden of Burning Apparitions by Full of Hell. This is a brand new album of the grindcore, Deathgrind, harsh noise, power electronics, power violence outfit, Full of Hell. They've done, in my opinion, some incredible stuff over the years, and I would argue that Full of Hell is one of the greatest groups in this sort of style in recent memory. They have a really aggressive and powerful sound, and one of the greatest aspects that you find, especially in their most recent albums, is how good the production is, which is something that you don't usually get with such harsh albums, which makes for some really refreshing material. Their combination of sounds and stylistic variations had as a result some really great albums from them to be made, some of them also with collaborations like with The Body, and in general albums that sound intense and immaculate, and I find it impressive how consistent their catalog has been so far. Most of the albums and most of the material they've done have been really great, so I would find kinda impressive that would keep up this streak for such a long time, and this led to me believing that eventually this streak is gonna break, because it just felt kinda unreal how, in my opinion, they've managed to make constantly and consistently so many great albums back to back. So for me it ended up being with this album where this streak actually breaks. In my opinion, Garden of Burning Apparitions is one of the weakest albums I've heard from Full of Hell. The intensity, the aggression is still there, but in my opinion this is the one album after such a long time where I don't feel that it contains some of their greatest or their most innovative and refreshing ideas. I still found many great and enjoyable moments, but this doesn't feel that much of a standout in comparison to some other works they've done. And I think one of the main aspects that makes this sort of their weakest album in recent memory is that the production, in comparison to many other projects, is not really all that spectacular. For me, one of the greatest things about Full of Hell albums is how mind-blowing the overall sound would be. It would have this really great balance of aggression but with some really detailed sound and textures. It would be an extremely raw sound, but it would still sound amazing, and in my opinion made for some of the best sounding albums in terms of grindcore and deathgrind I would ever hear. And it's not like this is completely abandoned in here. This album sounds good and it definitely has really good production that you don't usually find in albums in a style like this. However, in comparison to other albums Full of Hell have done, which would be mind-blowing in terms of production, this one in comparison just feels slightly inferior. It is a pretty raw and intense album, but the punch is not really there. It doesn't hit as hard. And it's also an album that goes for 20 minutes. This is possibly the shortest album they've ever done, and in this period of time they've actually managed to have different ideas and go into some stylistic variations here and there, but for the most part it's mostly stuff that we've heard being done before, and I would say that in previous cases it would be done in a better fashion as well. Like, the album starts with a kind of predictable note with the track Guided Blight, which is immediately followed by the track Asphyxiant Blessing, which I feel that the greatest part about this track is towards the end with its crackling noise sounds that sound really awesome. For me the greatest track out of this album is Derelict Satellite. This is not a surprise, this is one of the more different and unique tracks in the album. It's just a straight up messy and chaotic harsh noise track with really good sound on it, and it's also one of the longest moments. It goes for 3 minutes and it just sounds awesome. It is different compared to most of the stuff this album contains, going into the more standard power violence and grindcore directions, but I really like this particular track. It is a bit of a different approach, it is really intense, and the harsh noise sounds on it are really great. After this point the album goes into some pretty standard directions of like deathgrind, and with stuff that are pretty usual for Full of Hell. Halfway towards the album we get lots of moments like this, with none of them really having something that unique or surprising to them, or something that would make the experience somewhat different. We also end up getting some more melodic tracks in some occasions, and tracks that have a more of a standard structure to them, not really feeling as intense or as chaotic. The greatest example of this is the track Reeking Tunnels, which in my opinion is one of those tracks that it's not really executed that properly, unfortunately. I feel that this track is really interesting in the sense that it's definitely one of the most unique, full of hell tracks, especially in this album. It is much more melodic and straightforward compared to anything else. However, with this type of production and this type of vocals, it's not really all that fitting, so for me it was not one of the greatest moments in the album. In my opinion, it ends on a kinda strong note with a really harsh and noisy track Non-Atomism, followed by Celestial Hierarchy, which is another moment where we have Full of Hell ending their album with a more sludgy and heavy moment. It goes slower on tempo, it doesn't really extend as much in comparison to other albums, it only goes for 3.5 minutes, but it's still the longest track over here. In my opinion, it's not an impressive track, but it ends nicely. I like the noise portion towards the end and the way it carries towards the second half. So for me, this album was pretty interesting. Definitely don't hold it in that much of a high regard compared to some previous albums, but it's not like this album was a major disappointment for me or that I didn't like it. This album is pretty good. It just feels somewhat inferior compared to other really solid albums they've done because they've just set the bar really high after all of those years of consistently great albums. And in a sense, this album is certainly a development and an evolution for a band. In my opinion, it's just the execution that it's not their best. It doesn't contain some of their greatest ideas that in my opinion they have made better executions with similar sounds in the past. Still a pretty solid album for what it is. I'm gonna give Garden of Burning Apparitions a 6+ out of 10. What's your opinion on this album? Like it, dislike it, why, and what do you want to review next time? Let me know down in the comments. If you like, if you enjoyed the video, subscribe for more content like this. Thank you for watching, I'll see you all in the next video. Goodbye.